welcome to this day's webinar, which is the Azure Security Best Practices. As Victor said, my name is Sasha, and I'm Microsoft Azure MVP and Microsoft Azure Security MVP and Microsoft Certified Trainer and Regional Lead as well, and as well Certified C Council Instructor. And there's the Twitter handle. But for any information, any questions, please. You have the email on the beginning of this webinar, and you'll see the information on at the end as well, where you can direct your questions. And this webinar is about Azure security and best practices and some tips and tricks. So it's well, as with everything, the 60-70 minutes, it's too short for any comprehensive and deep dive into the Azure security and, well, into any topic. But anyway, as the security is very, very important in the cloud, well, not just in the cloud, but on premises. But since we are in the cloud era, it is the paramount, I would say, topic these days, and it will be in the future. It will be good that you just take away some best practices and with a little bit greater knowledge of what security in Azure is. So you know that first of all, just an overview of what we have in Azure. Probably you've already seen that, but it's important to see how people have to change their minds in order to be successful in security in Azure. So we'll see that Azure security spans both cloud provider in here and spans to us as well. So in the blue color is the things that we manage, and in the gray color are the things that cloud provider manages. So on premises, we took care of everything. We took care of storage, networking, compute, and everything. And once we transition to the cloud, and this is the cloud here, and now I see that I am missing the infrastructure as a service. So IaaS is infrastructure as a service. In this case, we have different tiers of responsibility, and while we are putting the responsibility here in infrastructure as a service model on the cloud provider, and especially more of it in the platform as a service, and even more on the software as a service model. That doesn't mean that we don't have security responsibilities in the cloud, and that is often overlooked. That's the first thing that we need to know. So we still have to worry about these things here if we encompass infrastructure as a service, or these here, or these there. So for example, one typical representative of a software as a service is Office 365. Why the security is important? Because Microsoft is, for example, managing all underneath applications, everything that is underneath that. But if we subscribe to Office 365 but have set a weak password, or if we don't use multi-factor authentication, we are still responsible for our data. Microsoft is not responsible for if we got breached, if our data is stolen. So it is not Microsoft's responsibility to set a strong password. That's the same comparable to the door manufacturer. The door manufacturer produced the ultimate secure door for your house, for a flat. But if you don't lock the door, then it's your fault, or if you lose the key, it's your fault, and it's not the manufacturer's fault, of course. So that's the same thing in here. So we need to know our responsibilities between in the different tiers, whether it's operating system, whether it's applications, data, and access, and act accordingly. So an overlook of trust and control in Azure, and well, not just in Azure, in Azure, but in everything. So the best security is layer security, where actually we call it as a onion security. So we are securing things from inside, from the outside to inside. So from physical access, in this case, Azure is secure physically, very secure. And this is not just by putting more locks on the doors, but is secure by design. So this is where actually cloud provider took its part, and we don't have actually much influence on that. But if nothing else, we do have insight of how this data center looks like. So we are either trusting the data center or not, or the cloud provider, and that physical security and design security also influences us, as well as we are choosing the right cloud provider, the one that is more secure. So, for example, data centers. One trivia: the data centers are designed architecturally as well, with the security in mind. So, for example, if we have a road here, and if we have a data center in there, so there is, for example, there is not a direct road that goes to that data center. Instead, how it's designed is designed that we have a road here, for example, then we have a roundabout, then we have a road there, and then we have a roundabout here. My pen is tricking me. And then we have also a road that goes there to the data center. Why is that? Because this is designed with security in mind. First of all, if we have any malicious intentions and bad people wanting to run a truck or run with some vehicle into the data center or do damage, then they will be of course they will have difficulties compared if they had a direct road to the data center. That just one of the things that is very important to know, that in fact the design of the physical data center actually the design of the data center becomes and starts with the security in mind. And then there's also 24/7 security staff. Of course, if you want to be employed there, then you have to pass the security screening, and not just they don't just have two-factor access control, but multi-factor authentication and access control, retina scans and palm reading as well. And of course, if you go into the data, if you'd like to go into the data center, yes, you have the possibility to go there as well. And you have to first, of course, announce yourself and get an appointment. But the point is that it's you will get you will get measured your weight when you go in and when you go out in certain cases. So it's very important that that you know that security is at the core of the Azure data centers and thus of the Azure. Microsoft is actually investing millions and billions of money in security, and that begins with the physical thing in mind. Then we have the infrastructure design, and that is secure by design, where the operation security controls and compliance certifications are gained. And Microsoft is actually doing penetration testing regularly, and there we have a DDoS protection, etc., etc. Then we have also network design, which is secure by design as well, and that's where we also have some influence, meaning we can install VPNs, we can install security appliances, we can subnet virtual networks, etc. And that's where it begins, everything with the infrastructure as a service. So we already have our foundation on the complete secure infrastructure, which is very secure, and we can then build everything on top of it. So having a layered security is very important, because the bad people actually will have to break each and every layer to actually get to your data. So in this case, it's not about just setting up one security control, because there is no such thing as a great big switch where we can pull it down and then turn on security. But in fact, is all the small things that we incorporate and that we do that will make our Azure environment more secure. For example, subnet access control list, or force tunneling, or routes, user-defined routes, or security appliances, and then some anti-malware, key vault, and RBAC controls, and so on. So like disk and storage encryption, etc., etc. So all these layers add to security, and actually add two important things to our security. First of all, it adds time that bad guys need to spend to get to your data here at the center, because they have to breach all the obstacles that you've made for them. First of all, it takes time, and then second, connected to that time, is also you're raising the cost to that to breach these things. So money time is money, but indirectly you need a personnel that is knowledgeable, and so that costs money. So as many as the security controls you have, the more secure your data center will be. So first of all, we will Azure is a huge platform, huge service that has many services and many moving parts, many features. But for example, all of these, and this is not a comprehensive and 100% comprehensive picture, because these are just excerpts from the services that are in Azure. Each of these things have their own security features, security settings, and that can be tailored, that can be tuned in, turned on, and so on. So if you're dealing with data, then you will have to know about the security in Redis cache, or about security in your code if you're coding. But if you're in the infrastructure as a service, and if you're into the hybrid cloud, and most of us are, then we need to know at least some basics that will greatly improve the security. And that is all about here in this webinar. We'll just show a few of the things that will greatly increase your security, and that won't break your bank, and that actually can have a great impact on that. But please feel free to check also the past webinars for some additional information as well, and the future webinars, which will be available in the archive on the Informator website. So first of all, we need to take care about network protection. So we need to take care about network protection. So first of all, there is by default, when we create the resource, these resources are actually immediately available on the internet. So we have different ways how can we secure them. So for example, if we have a virtual machine deployed here, let's say this is the one, and then if we want to get access to that virtual machine, then we need to also secure that access to be unavailable, or to be as much as secure as possible, to be unavailable to non-authorized personnel, and to be as secure as possible. So, for example, we won't be directly accessing this virtual machine, but indirectly from the inside. But if we do, then there are a lot of things that we can do. There is, for example, Azure Bastion, which is the special network, which gives you the possibility to access the virtual machine directly from the commodity of the web browser. And we can implement different things as well. For example, like we can implement jump boxes, or let's say some jump computers, which are actually computers in a separate networks that are protected, and that have access to the outside world. So these jump boxes actually will first solve as a layer of protection that will allow us to log in, and then from that jump box we will be actually able to go inside and to access the different tiers. So in this case, what we need to know and need to do in when we design our networks is to provide a logical isolation by isolating virtual networks. It means that we have to capability to subnet these networks, so subnet networks accordingly. So don't put everything in one network. Subnetting is good, and also creating multiple networks as well. So, well, of course, you have to pay. You have to worry about generating additional traffic if these networks are in the different zones. But if they're in the same zone, then you have the possibility to connect them securely by network peering, and thus allow only allowed networks to access the specific network. So, for example, deployment Y network, VLAN actually, or a virtual network, can only access deployment X and vice versa. So while subnet 2 can access subnet 3, then doesn't mean that subnet 3 can access subnet 2. So we have to also worry about that, and take into consideration also these design considerations. So don't assume that since these subnets and networks are in our tenant and in our infrastructure, that these will be secure. We've talked about also, we mentioned some zero trust security previously, but we'll mention also here it briefly. So what is zero trust? It is the strategy where we actually assume breach, and that we don't take for granted that anything inside is actually legitimate. So in this case, zero trust strategy will mean also that we are not trusting that subnet 3 can access subnet 2 without actually being authenticated or authorized. So if this is the, for example, web tier, and this is the data tier, so we certainly want to limit these tiers, how these talk to each other, and also we have to restrict these endpoints. Additionally, we will see how can we restrict endpoints, for example, for the data tier, for the SQL servers, and so on. Then there are, I'll mention the virtual networks and security groups. So these security groups or network security groups control how can we access our networks, and specifying the network security group rules actually rules out how can we access from how can different VLANs access and gain access to each other. This is also very important. So when we speak about connections, and when we talk about connecting to our customer site or our private sites, then there are vast possibilities here. So we can either connect directly using point-to-site VPN. Point-to-site VPN is good if we have only one point, hence name point-to-site. I've seen implementations where actually people companies try to circumvent and or I would say abuse the point-to-site VPN and actually use one point-to-site connection to access to allow multiple users to access it, and let's say emulate or circumvent site-to-site VPN. But it's never good. It's never good policy to do that. So site-to-site VPN and even multiple VPNs here are available, and not just available but desirable. So if we have a possibility, and if we have a critical services that run in on premises, this can be on-prem, but this could be, for example, different cloud as well. It doesn't have to be physical on-prem situation. Then we are able to either connect in the one-to-many or many-to-many, or even have many VPN designs. So redundant ones that will of course be a little bit more costly, but it will greatly enhance the security, since if one is down or not working, one connection, then there's always the other one that is used to connect. And we can also use the route tables to route the specific traffic towards across the VPN and across the specific VPN to the specific VPN. So route tables or user defined routes here are I'm sorry, I've started subtitles here, and I have to disable these, of course. Yeah, user defined routes here are the ones that are very effective here for segmenting traffic. Then even if we have point-to-site and site-to-site concurrently, then this is also something that is manageable, especially if we have user-defined routes that we can also redirect our traffic towards the specific VPN or appliance if we have these on premises or in the cloud. So, for example, if we have this remote worker connecting to the specific resource, then it will go first to the firewall and then to the resource. Except for the other resources, other connections that will go directly to the resource, and the firewall inspection won't be necessary. So everything is configurable by user-defined routes, and it's good practice also to segment that as well. One good thing in Azure is that it provides our threat detection, and also we are able to well, Microsoft is regularly performing penetration testing and securing our infrastructure. But we mentioned the at the end of the presentation the distributed denial of service protection as well. And but today, when the security is the major buzzword, I would say, there's one question. So, what do you think? What is the biggest issue today in modern security in cloud era. So what would you say? So is it well, the security landscape is shifting, and certainly we need to think a little bit differently in this cloud era than we did in on-premises only era. But still, biggest issue in modern security, you probably won't be surprised, is the actual are we the users. So there is human error, there are us, there is me, Dave, like in this picture. So always and always, well, in most cases, there is a human error or human factor that is actually a crucial thing that we need to secure, and that's where zero trust is, and that's where we have to focus our security investment, not just in reducing human error, which is education, proper education, and I mean also all this is frequently neglected, but even non-technical people, non-IT aware people need to get some basic IT security awareness course, let's say, or be enlightened. So recently, a few years ago, I was consulting in one big world company that produces cars, and one of the biggest car manufacturers, and they actually had a breach, and that breach happened because a user in the human resources department actually clicked on a phishing email that installed ransomware that infected almost 80–90% of their computers. And in one of their factories that was producing and spending thousands of tons of steel per day and producing thousands of cars per day, that factory actually stopped for more than a week and incurred costs more than a couple of hundreds of millions in the first month, and almost I would say like more than $1 billion in the next year because of the losses they've suffered because because of that one click of the person that did in the phishing email. So a few machines weren't and accounts weren't MFA enabled, and first of all, and then the second, it was a very good phishing email that was hard to spot, but that was preventable by some education and raising awareness among the employees, and some security controls weren't there adopted. So these things have, well, they would have been able to prevent all these if they've just listened to some advice that they have been given to them about user education, about MFA, about some security basic security controls. And we're talking here about thousands of machines. So the identity and access and begins and trust begins with Azure AD. So before we had on-premises network, we had four walls, and in order to get to the data, then let's say more or less users needed to get physical to that network, because they were incorrect, the network weren't connected to the internet as it was today. Today, the data is more out in the wild, on the run, I would say. It's not anymore on the services, on the servers and on premises, but it's in the cloud. And the end users here are actually using the data on their tablets, on their laptops, on their mobile phones, accessing cloud applications, accessing Office 365, Google Suite, whatever they're using. And the bad people actually are targeting the lowest hanging fruit, and that is the actual users. So phishing, social engineering, and unpatched devices, and hence the new control plane is the identity. So identity is new control plane, and we need to strictly, well, more to give more focus and more attention to that, to these parts as well. So identity is very important, and using Azure AD or strongly monitored users, for example, and using the services that leverage the security in here, like Azure Defender, and endpoint management is also very important, but also conditional access. So let's just take a look at the conditional access after we mention multi-factor authentication. Well, we will have multi-factor authentication webinar day after tomorrow on Friday, and where we will talk about the passwordless authentication and about multi-factor authentication. So I suggest that you go, that you join us on Friday as well, but tomorrow as well for the role-based access control, which is also very important in securing your Azure assets. And multi-factor authentication actually is free today. Microsoft made it free. Before it was. You had to pay a little bit for it, but today it's free. And today it said that multi-factor authentication, or MFA, or second factor authentication actually can resolve or save you from 99% of problems that you have if compared to that if you don't have MFA enabled. Since it's free, there is no reason not to have it, but I suggest that you use also the conditional access to do that. So having multi-factor authentication is absolute must. And a few years ago, it was I think it was Microsoft's official information on one Ignite. I think it was 2018, that only few percent of the, like 5 to 7%, I think, of the world's administrators actually use MFA. And it is good that Microsoft made multi-factor authentication free and mandatory for admin users, and you should make it mandatory for your users as well. It adds a little bit of overhead, but it will save you tremendously. It will save your data, save your business at the end. So first of all, let's just go quickly and take a look at where it is. Oh, there it is. I'll take a look at the multi-factor authentication and the actual Azure conditional access, which is also very important, that I suggest that you use. In fact, I suggest that you use Azure conditional access to access to set up the multi-factor authentication. So first of all, if we go to the Active Directory, then we have the security settings here. And there it is, security. And then there is also the conditional access there. So the conditional access is practically what it is. It gives you access based on certain conditions. So first of all, we have the possibility to create a policy, and the conditional access policy actually is built from it's contained from it has two parts. It has assignments, and it has access controls. So what it is actually, it is the way how we control access to the users based on the conditions that users and their devices have. The conditions might be user is accessing from a familiar location, or from unfamiliar location. And if we speak about the devices, then the condition of the device might be it is the approved device or unapproved device, it is device that is secure or not secure, and so on. So based on these signals, Microsoft Intelligence is actually assessing the risk conditions of the device and the user, and making educated, and making and actually you are defining the policy, and how will you respond to these assessments. So if the user is, for example, if the user is a high risk user, which means the security bar was raised for that user alert, because the intelligence, Microsoft Intelligence found out that the last login was from London, and 2 hours after that, the user tried to log in from Tokyo, which is actually impossible. And since it's impossible travel, the user risk is set from low to medium or to high, and therefore we are then are able to respond to such behavior. So first of all, we have the assignments that we need to define to the users and groups, and we can include or exclude some users. But one caveat here: when you define your when you define your users, your policies, with incorrectly defined policies, you can lock yourself out, and you will also get the information here as a warning. So don't lock yourself out if you create a policy that will act on such way. That's why you have down there information about enabling policy on or off, or reporting only. I suggest that you when you configure policy, then you do report only. Then you will have the reports how the policy behaves, and whether and you will then know how will actually the policy work after it's enabled. So you can include users, all users, selected user and groups, all guests and external user, or some directory roles, for example. Billing administrator, or whatever it is, compliance administrator, etc., etc. We're defining these users. Then we are defining to which cloud applications or actions are actually this conditional access will apply to all cloud applications, or to select cloud applications. So again, there is also one warning here, not to lock yourself out in here. And then there are the conditions as well. So the conditions selected here define user risk, sign-in risk, device platform locations, and also device state. So the user risk can be something from low to high. It means the user is behaving. The user past behavior was defined as risk behavior. So, for example, what can be defined as risk behavior? So let's say that intelligence, the baseline for that user is that the user logs in from 9 a.m. till 5 p.m., which is in the normal working hours during Monday to Friday. But if a user logs in, let's say once or twice or 3 times, tries to log in during the off hours or on a weekend, then this might raise the user risk from low to medium or even to high. And compared, for example, combined with some unknown location or unknown IP address, unusual, then the user risk will be set to high. And according to that, then your conditional access policy will function in a specific way. So we are defining that user risk here. Then we are defining the sign-in risk. That's the sign-in risk that I've mentioned before. For example, impossible travel is one of the factors that will raise the sign-in risk from no risk or low to medium or high even. And we can then filter out and define also device platforms. So we can select to which platforms and devices this policy will apply to, whether it will be applied to Android, iOS, Windows Phone. Oh, Windows Phone, yes, it's still here, and or Mac OS or whatever. So we can define also the locations. So the locations might be any location that we define as trusted location. I'll show you that afterwards. And or the selected location. The selected location might be any of these locations. For example, trusted IPs. We can then set up the we can just click the IPs or IP ranges that we trust, or we can set up the countries that we are applying the conditional access policy to. So this is also possible. And to the client apps as well, and to the specific device state, which is actually not of a big deal here because it's still in preview, but it will have hopefully more features when it gets out of preview. But we can then have more the exclusion options than inclusion options here. Then when we define the assignments, then we have access controls here as well. And then we can define these access controls. So for conditions that we define here, for cloud apps or actions, user sign-in risk, and etc., we define whether we will completely block access or if we will conditionally grant access. And that access will be granted after requiring multi-factor authentication or after requiring the devices to be marked as compliant. It means that device, for example, will have the latest anti-malware definitions updated, or it will have the latest security update applied, and etc. All it will have, all it need to have, it will need to have a required approved client app from which the user will sign in, and so on. And at the end, there's also the session, which is actually the session that applies to only the Office 365 currently, Exchange Online and SharePoint Online. So, but it will hopefully have more in the future. So the through this part, we are actually able to access to configure the conditional access policy for the specific user, specific locations, and specific usage patterns. And don't forget to before actually applying enabling policy and putting an on, try first report only to see how the policy applies to which users and devices or devices will apply, and under what conditions, and what will be the actual outcome. So it's of utmost importance that you don't lock yourself out by defining a conditional access policy in such way. So that's the conditional access policy. And then there is also, but we will mention this also in Friday, then there's the MFA, multi-factor authentication, and then we can define here also we can also here define the actual named locations for multi-factor authentication, and this can be any new location that we want to be, that will consist of either IP ranges and IP addresses or countries or regions. So we can mark these as trusted locations, and set up different countries and regions that we will actually include in this batch. So that's the point of naming locations. So we can actually tailor our conditional access policies or MFA challenges to the specific IP ranges or addresses or countries or regions in this case. Then there is also one thing that I want to say also about key vaults as well. So the use of key vaults and is also very important. So if you have some web applications, so if you have platform as a service applications running in there, or if you wrote some custom applications, then there is also the key vault possible, option possible. Well, not possible, but it's actually desirable, but I won't say mandatory, but desirable, because of course you have the options to do what you want, but I suggest that you use the key vault. The point is that when you use key vault, all the secrets that you have, and the secret in this case can be any information that you want to control access to, then this key vaults, let's go to one key vault. These key vaults can provide controlled access to the key to the secrets that you have, that you're protecting. And this can be, let's see if this one has something in here. This one has, there are keys. So we can store in the key vault keys, secrets, any kind of secret that's the for example, password or website admin password or whatever, or some certificates, and then reference to these from our applications directly. So this key here, it's just a key. It has its own ID, and of course, we also have a way to granularly set up these keys, activation date, expiration date, and permitted operation on these keys. And we can also see the key as well. Let's say let's go to the this one. So for example, different key, let's say if we have a secret that we have stored here, and which is this one, with each secret has its own identifier, and we can see once we click in it, in the secret, we can see the secret value that it is. We can then control access to it and reference to these secrets, to these keys in a secure way. So we can define access policies to these and grant access only, for example, to virtual machines for deployment, for disk encryption. We can create a permission model that allows only Azure role-based access control, which is in preview now, or add an access policy that will allow different users to access these keys at the different ways. So see the key, verify, sign, delete, recover, and get the key, and so on. What does it mean? simplified if we have, let's say, one application that needs to have administrator key or a database key to access. So let's say that we have web application on the one side and the database server on the other side. We can then set the username and password, well, password the secret for accessing the database for the web access in the key vault, and only the application which is authorized and which has access defined here can access the database, and the database server won't have the direct access to the actual key vault. Actually, the key of the secret will never be directly known, but provided in a secure way for a resource to be accessed. So we are actually controlling who has the access to these keys, while keeping the keys secret and not publicly available nor known to the user of what keys are, but available for use. So we have two flavors of the key vaults. One is the key vault that has the software protection, and the other one is the and the other one is actually that can generate hardware-backed keys as well. And I suggest that you use all these key vaults as well, which actually can protect our secrets even more in Azure. In fact, that this would be these would be the only proper way actually to store secrets for workloads in the cloud and deploy globally. So we have, like it said here, we have the possibility to monitor, to audit key usage, and what is really important, we can centrally manage keys and secrets, and we don't have the need to deploy, configure, or update our own hardware security model, since we have also the possibility to do that as well is here. And there's also option for encryption at rest here, which is available by default. By default, there is a encryption at rest on the hard disks, on the SSDs in the Azure data center. But we are also have the possibility to use all the protections that are available for us along the way. So while Microsoft, or cloud provider in this case, Microsoft, is using this disk encryption, once let's say this is the data center, and this is the physical disk where our VHD is stored. Let's say the physical disk in the data center is actually encrypted, but our VHD is actually also can be encrypted as well, while is in the Azure data center, while it's on our subscription, laying on our storage. Why is that important? So, for example, while encryption in the data center prevents a malicious user to actually get the physical disk and then read the content of the disk, then VHD encryption enables us and actually secures us from a malicious person to exporting and getting the VHD out of the data center. So while the VHD is inside, it is protected and secured, but once we are able to get that VHD outside the data center and download it on our computer, this VHD can be attached to any computer, any virtualization software, and then the contents could be read from that VHD. So that's why we have also the possibility to implement disk encryption as well. So we are then securing our VHD even if it's imported, exported on the laptop or locally, that it will stay encrypted and tied to only to virtual machine that was supposed to run on, and that actually saves us from a lot of headaches, potential headaches. So then along the way, there are a lot of things that provide security and encryption. For example, like BitLocker for the storage and for the virtual machine, and encryption file system, and transparent database encryption, like it said here. But disk encryption in this case, that's what I've mentioned before. We have encrypted disks by default, but we still have to encrypt these VHDs when we are actually to protect them when from the malicious operators that actually can to prevent these VHDs to be read on the local storage. Then we have, for example, if we have databases, then we have by default encryption in transit, which protects the data between client and server. But we have the transparent data encryption for SQL database that protects data on disk, and also the end-to-end encryption. It is the client-side column encryption for SQL, for example. So let's go quickly and see the actual options for encryption in Azure SQL. So we have here two SQL parts. One is the SQL server, and the other one is the database on that server. So we have different settings for the server itself and for the databases itself. And then let's say we have different things here available. Auditing, first of all, auditing is turned on here. So with the auditing, we have the possibility to track database events and to write them onto a log. We can write that log onto the storage and configure that storage, and actually choose where we can actually store that. So for example, I will choose a storage account here, and that is in the North Europe, let's say. And we can also set up the retention days for these. I will set this for 90 days, or even more, 180. And we can use that primary or secondary storage access key to access that. And I'll click OK. And of course, don't forget, when you make changes, don't forget to click save, because sometimes I forget to click save and I'm wondering what's happening. And then don't forget to click save here. It's very important. So audit log destinations can be either or, and both storage and log analytics. Log analytics means that today is in preview, but we can stream that to log analytics workspace and actually use custom query KQL or custom query language actually to query these logs and see the behavior. And also there's also the possibility to stream these events to the Event Hub and actually connect them to some actions. Event Hub is the aggregator, is the hub to which we can connect, and then on the other hand, connect the consumers of the events to do some appropriate actions based on the events that happened on the other side. So for example, we might tie a logic app that will do some action based on the things that happened during the SQL auditing, and based on the particular information in the SQL audit log. Then there is also a very important part, which is the firewalls and virtual networks, which is also a possibility to set up the minimum TLS version, which is 1.2, which is the current one and the suggested one. Then we can define also the connection policy. So the connection policy here is, what does it mean? It means that, let me show you this one. The connection policy means that when I want to access the database or the server, then it means that I'll need to actually be able to connect to the server and to the database. So let's type in the password. Hopefully it's correct one, and connect. I'm not authenticated to the Azure. Let's see. Sign into your account. Okay. Which one? This one. So first of all, I have to authenticate to Azure and then authenticate to SQL Server. So it will take a few seconds to authenticate to Azure. Hopefully, let's check out my phone and see whether it's two-factor authentication is triggered. Oh, not yet. There will be. So you don't have access to this. Yes, your sign-in was successful because I was authenticated before. There was no MFA trigger for this time, but you don't have permission to access this resource. Okay, why is that? Because in here there is the connection policy that is not allowing me to access this resource. So, for example, I can add a client IP, the current one. This is the current client IP, and I need to click save, and I can add, of course, different IP ranges in here as well. So once I've done that and set up the IP ranges, then I can actually connect to this database. So now we see that actually I'm allowed to access the database. In the first take, I was able to I was successfully logged into Azure, but I haven't had access to actually the SQL Server or to the databases. So let's just go to the, let's say, customer address, and let's go and see what happens next. So we can then additionally ensure that only allowed virtual networks can access the SQL Server and so on. So we can name it the rule, add the virtual network, and only allow a specific virtual network to allow our resources. Then we have also the TDE here, which is the transparent data encryption, which is using service managed key. It means Microsoft is managing the key, but we can also manage our own key that can we select and change the key to encrypt the database. It can be picked up from the specific key vault, and it can be used to encrypt and decrypt the database. But beware, because if you encrypt the database with a key from your key vault and then delete the key from that key vault, then your database will be inaccessible, because there's absolutely no way to retrieve the data. And Microsoft has no way actually to decrypt the data, nor to retrieve your key. There is the soft delete possibility in Azure Key Vault, which means that it will actually your keys will be recoverable for a certain period of time if you set it up so. But if you have not, or if the time has expired and you don't have the keys, then you have to worry about also to take into consideration also this as well. And plus, there's also one thing that I want to show you as well, because there's also the possibility to mask the data, which is also very important, especially in the GDPR world, and which means that the email addresses can be masked from users. So here it says that administrators are always excluded. So I'm an administrator and logged in a database, I will be always excluded from seeing this. But if we have a different user, for example, if we have a user that is that is not administrator, then we can add a mask here and set up the mask function. Mask function means that we will actually mask the value with unrecognizable characters, and hence increase the security and privacy of the data. So any email address in the database that will be, let's say, accessed by a non-administrative user will be masked here. So these databases here, hence I'm the administrator here, and I'm accessing this database. So this is the I will be able to actually see the email address. So but if where's that? Customer address top rows. Anyway, if I were a non-administrative user, this information will be like email address will be masked. So in following this pattern. So this is also very important for being compliant and for protecting the users and their privacy, as well as safeguarding your data. And we still have a few minutes to go, and I will only say that also there are a lot of security features in Azure, but one great feature is and product is Azure Firewall. Yes, we do have third-party firewalls as well, but why I like Azure Firewall more than the others, it might not have all the options, it might not have all the things that the other have, but this is actually the firewall as a service, let's say. This is the platform as a service, which means compared to the third-party firewalls, where you have to have the virtual machine that is also a security boundary per se, and then the firewall is provided as a software that installs on the top of that virtual machine, that is also security per se. So you have to manage infrastructure, you have to manage the software, you have to manage the firewall, and worry about the security of these things. Here in Azure Firewall, you don't have to worry about these things. You have just to worry about how you set up your firewall, because the availability, scaling, and everything is managed by a cloud provider, by Microsoft, and the only thing that you have to worry about is setting your rules correctly. So take a look at Azure Firewall if you haven't done so. And the good thing is if you took a look last year to that one, it is cheaper now. I can't remember what is the percentage, about 30, 40, 50%, something like that. The price was cut last year, so it's a very nice product, and there's a lot more coming to the Azure Firewall, and some new features have been also announced and actually are in preview. And it's a great product. It has a little bit more features than it had a couple of months ago, so take a look at this one. It's very good. And there's also WAF, or Web Application Firewall, which is the compared to the Azure Firewall, which is the layer 4. This is the actually layer 7 and load balancing firewall, which has the high availability, scalability, and It also takes the SSL offloading and so on. It is also a crucial part and moving part in the overall security picture. And last but not last is the actual Azure DDoS protection that we always have in our basic form, but only if you have need for logging, alerting, and some additional protection, then you can opt in to the standard one, which is a little bit more, cost compared to the basic one. And of course, there's also the Azure Security Center and Azure Sentinel, which are also big moving parts, which deserve their own part and their own webinar, because they're comprehensive and in huge parts. But take a look at the Azure Security Center. Don't neglect it. It had some upgrades during the recent announced during the recent Ignite a few weeks ago, and worth looking at, as well as Azure Sentinel with its core capabilities of monitoring and enrichment with geolocation, IP repudiation, and user and entity analytic behavior capabilities now announced recently and enhanced as well. And we might also have watch the webinar space, because we might also have something coming in this part as well.